Okay, let's play some damn shit. Street 4. Come on, smack that slut. Get back, faggot!
whether you find me on Instagram or on TikTok or here on YouTube. I very much appreciate y'all. So please go ahead and hit that follow button and click that like button, please, because clicking the like button and clicking the subscribe button and turning on your notifications will push this video out to more people. And I want this platform to skyrocket. I want this video in itself and many other videos that I have to skyrocket as well. So if you would so kindly, please go ahead and hit that follow button. And please go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And if you already subscribed, make sure that you turn on all notifications. It might be personalized, so you might sometimes get my videos and sometimes you might not. You might not get notifications. So turn on all notifications so that every time that I do post, you will always see it. All right, every short, every YouTube video, all that good stuff. I very much appreciate y'all. I just wanted to give y'all some love there, all right? Like the video, subscribe, okay? Now, as I said, I was on Facebook. Now let's stop the video for a second. You might be watching this video looking for a deconstruction kit or a bundle or a set of resources for you to develop into kind of advance your personal journey in life, right? Now, this deconstruction bundle that I'm going to give for you, right, is not something that is going to try and give you another way of finding life, another spiritual way of living, another way of interpreting God. This is not about you finding another religion. This is about you being yourself. This is about your personal development. This is to help you out. This is something that I would give to my 17-year-old self when I left Christianity. Okay, and this bundle is not for anybody in terms of like anybody specific. This is for the skeptics, the agnostics, the deconstructionists, the Christians who might be questioning things. Even if you don't want to put a label on it, all right, this is what the bundle is for you. Compacted lectures. I'm talking about book lists, bundles, journals, PDFs, even helping you lose weight, even helping you keep track of your own personal desires and your purpose and your desires in life and how you want to conduct your life. This is what we have stabilized and put into this bundle. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and click the link in my bio or in the description box, and I'll see you there. Back to the show. I had posted yesterday, if Jesus wanted me to know he was real, he would have told me by now. And one of the first comments we deal with a man named Cole Sinclair. He says, well, after he quotes something from James chapter 4, verse 2, he reads from the English Standard Version and it says, you desire and you do not have. So you murder, you convict and not abstain or obtain. So you fight and quarrel, you do not have because you do not ask. Now, this verse remotely has nothing to do with anything I said in the post, but he uses this into saying that, well, you don't know Jesus because you haven't asked for Jesus to reveal himself to you. This is the stupid stuff that I come across on social media and even on platforms and on live streams and all these different things, is that somehow, as much as people would like to claim that God is not a genie, they treat God like a genie. You can just clap your hands and he's supposed to magically appear. You're supposed to have some type of magic lamp that you can rub for God to just close himself. You gotta rub your Bible 3 times over. Somehow, Holy Spirit is supposed to conjure up a vision, or you're supposed to be transported into some type of heavenly realm or something like that. And that's just not how that works. It would be nice if that is how God could work, dragon tails and stuff like that. But for whatever reason, God makes it very hard, very complicated to contact him and to connect with him. And there are many different people in the world who believe that they have an actual, genuine, intimate connection with God, and yet they're led astray. They are vividly led astray. There are so many different cults under the name of Christianity that it's hard to really keep count of the thousands of cults internationally. We go on down to Austin. Austin Jones says, it's not about whether he is real or not. To believe doesn't mean what you think. It literally means to live by. But it's interesting though, right? For people who do believe in God, they fervently believe, right? They fervently believe, that not only is this man real, not only do they have an intimate relationship with him, but they believe that he is coming back. He is coming back for the saints, right? For those good few, the small remnant of people in the world who endured the long tribulations and all these different things. Ironic enough, for those who don't know, Revelation is an apocalyptic drama that was written for late 1st, early 2nd century Christians because of their subjugation and oppression of the Roman Empire. Had nothing to do with what's going on today in, I guess, the present day and stuff like that. That's why Paul and so many other Christians during that time were waiting for Jesus to come back during that time. No figure, because Christianity descends out of Second Temple Judaism, and a lot of those different sects were very endowed into the apocalypse and Armageddon, waiting for someone to save them, because they were just going into one exile to another, unfortunately. Appreciate you, Austin. We get to Mr. Aaron Stan, and he says, so then, I guess he's trying to say, what makes you think that what you think changes anything? Well, it's not about what I think necessarily changes anything here. It's the fact of the matter that if Jesus knows my heart, if he knows me like the back of my hand, if he knows the number of hairs on top of my scalp, then he knows exactly what needs to happen in order for me to be on the right team. He knows exactly what needs to happen for me to get back on his good side again. But it just seems like if he is real, that's just not the case. If he actually cares, he don't care enough or bother enough to actually want me to be invited or to be brought back into his holy sanctuary. So there's that. We got Slasher. He said, y'all killed him once. He ain't stupid this go around. He's hiding in plain sight. Yeah, interesting though. As funny as that is, it wasn't even the people, right, or the masses, the world that crucified Christ. Now, what's interesting enough, and I'm gonna drop a little bit of game here. I think the Gospels are very biased in terms of what actually caused Jesus to be crucified, because they more so, depending on which Gospel that you read, sometimes they lean a little bit more towards the Romans, and sometimes they lean a little bit more towards the Jews. And most of the time, we get the idea that it was the Jewish people that caused Jesus to be crucified. The Jews, for whatever reason, had the power to crucify Christ, his own people. When it was between Jesus Barabbas and Jesus Christ, yes, because there were two Jesuses on amongst Pontius Pilate asked the people, who shall I set free? And they tell Pontius Pilate, bring us Barabbas, which is interesting, right? Barabbas was considered an insurrectionist. He was a revolutionary. He was a rebel against their empire. That's a very interesting concept to think about. So you got Jesus who have healed the sick, who has raised the dead, he has given sight to the blind, he has fed 5,000 people, and then he's fed another 4,000 people. Where were these people at when all of this was going down? I don't know. Where was his disciples at when all of this was going down? We don't know. And people could speculate that some of his disciples maybe was amongst the crowd, and that's why a lot of people, that's why we have this narrative in the Gospels. That could only be speculation though. But what's interesting though is that most of the time it's always targeted towards the Jewish people. And when I started to study early Christianity, and I started to really get into depth into studying this, when I started reading Ancient Christianity by Paula Fredrickson, she gives insight that when you start to develop more of the Gentile Christian communities, thanks to Paul, there started to be a bit of confliction between Gentile Christians and Jewish Christians. And it even got to a point where Gentile Christians and those different sects and communities started to ridicule not only the Jewish Christians but the actual Jews as well, because of the idea or the propaganda that they were responsible for the death and the crucifixion of Christ. Now, on the other hand, with the Romans crucifying Christ, that would make a lot more sense, and especially if this is something that actually happened historically, because of Jesus causing some type of ruckus according to the institution, right? According to their empire, they had mocked him because he professed to be the quote-unquote king of the Jews. That's why they had given him a crown of thorns, and they had a big old sign on top of his cross that said, Jesus Christ, the King of the Jews, all that type of stuff. So, very interesting to look into. But, appreciate you. Moving on, we're going to get on down to Dilto Clintron. He says, he know you're not going to believe. And I responded saying, good to know he's not all powerful. The reason why I say that is because if Jesus cannot find any specific way to make me believe in him, he can't have all the tricks up his sleeve out of anything that he could actually say to me. He can't find one way to make me believe in him again. He can't have a sit down way. He can't walk and talk and show us some type of just anything. He knows me. He knows exactly what it would take for me to turn back to him. And then when I do expose or I reveal or express what it would take for me to come back to him, possibly, oh, that's not good enough, that's not how that works, you have to do your part, all that type of stuff, right? And so now it's just, I'm chasing after you, no matter what I gotta do. I don't have time to be doing that shit. That's all I was called. I'm not gonna be over here trying to look for the golden needle in the haystack, alright? Not doing that. But appreciate you, Dillo. Samuel Darnell says, you either find faith or find hell, by Gramps in 1999. If your Gramps is not alive, you rest his soul, but that was a very shitty quote, I'm not gonna lie to you. You either find faith or you find hell, as that's all that life comes down to. You either find Jesus or you find the devil. You either love God or you love Satan. I don't even know how you would give Satan that much power for him to be the exact opposite. He's the other option. That relationship dynamic is very interesting in itself. I've done a series on that, so you might want to go and check that series out. The series is called Why Didn't God Just Get Rid of the Devil? It's a very interesting series I have on YouTube. Appreciate you, Samuel. Going on down to Don. He says, and this is in big caps, right? I told him to seek help. He says, he is telling you all the time, if you would just take out the time to read and ask God for understanding. Mind you, he's just giving me his conviction. That's all that he's doing. He's just giving me what he believes. He is convinced that God is real. And so he's just telling me that all I have to do is just take time out to read a book according to his understanding and his interpretation of the book and ask God for the understanding. But the only way that I can get this form of understanding is that if it's measured according to this man's indoctrination. Because people will love to tell you, just read your Bible and ask God to reveal himself to you. But then when you come to a certain conclusion about God that doesn't fit their dynamic, that doesn't fit their framework, now all of a sudden you're leaning on your own understanding, you're not contributing to the right spirit, you're a heretic, all that type of stuff. Crazy. Jamie McDonald. They say it is pride that often gets in the way. And they quote something from Matthew 7, and they also quote something from Matthew chapter 5. So verse 13 says, enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. Verse 14 says, but small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. And then in Matthew chapter 5, verse 3, it says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Again, I don't know what any of these verses have anything remotely to do. It's the same thing with old boy when he quoted from James. This has nothing to do with anything that I said. So pride is not what's getting in the way of me not contributing my life to Jesus Christ. If anything, I have the intelligence to understand the story in the gospel of Christ, who has to respect its groundings, and I also understand and make a strong distinction according to the gentrification of that movement, or whatever was trying to be brought forth by this individual, and how it has been distorted and tainted and corrupted, and now that's where you get Christianity. I've been saying for the past few years now that Christianity, to me, and the way that it's, at least how it's been seen in the Western world, is the Antichrist. And a lot of these Christians do not follow Jesus Christ, they follow a demiurge. That's what I personally believe. But see, a lot of these Christians do not know how to engage into a meaningful conversation with someone. They automatically paint me out as the bad guy. They automatically paint me out as a heathen. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm bitter. I'm church hurt. I have some type of issue going on with God, or something that happened to me in church. I'm suffering through religious traumas. No. I've thought very hard on these different ideas and concepts. I have internalized these different ideas and concepts. I'm very spiritual and very in tune with my nature in terms of who I am and how I see the world. And I've come to these different assessments, and I express them through my videos and through my content. And so if your Jesus, in the way that you display Jesus, wants to reveal himself to me, he knows where to find me. It's as simple as that. It's not pride. If anything, it's being as open and curious as I can get. So yeah, Mr. Steve Forrester says, he said, draw near to me, and I will draw near to you. He is a gentleman. I respond in saying, how am I supposed to draw near a man that I don't know or believe in? Does that even make sense to you? Could you imagine somebody telling you to write a letter to Santa Claus and mail it to the North Pole, and I'm pretty sure Santa Claus will write back to you? Let's even go further, right? Because everybody has a different Jesus. So when you tell me to find Jesus, what Jesus? Everybody doesn't have the same Jesus. Geographically, ethnically, socially, politically, spiritually, religiously, denominationally, can I even say that? Everybody has a different Jesus. Jesus, he does not appear the same to everybody. He doesn't express himself the same to everybody. Sometimes he looks a little masculine. Sometimes he looks a little flamboyant. Sometimes he looks a little lighter than usual. Sometimes a little darker than usual. Sometimes he might be a little tall. Sometimes he might be a little short. Sometimes he might be a bit aggressive. Sometimes he might be a bit passive. And we're supposed to take all of this into consideration. Everybody, even in the first century, did not look at Jesus the same way, because you got to come to an understanding that most of these people were marginalized. Not only were they marginalized, and they couldn't read and write. A lot of them were like, the literate rate was very low. A lot of them were peasants. So you're talking about people who were dwelling amongst one another in praise and worship and all these different things. And all they had was a letter from Paul. Some of they had was one oral tale attributed to Mark or Luke or John, whatever the case is. And that's all they had to feed on for decades. until different churches started to come together hundreds of years later and compact a canon. But you have to take that into consideration that there were different communities and even little sub-schisms that were happening even within those environments. And even still to this day, there is still a lot of schisms within Christianity that happens even now. That's why there are churches on every block. You would think everybody should come together. There should be like one unified church per state or something like that. Or maybe per district or per county, whatever the case is, but that's just not the case. It's not. Because even within Christianity, there's individual thought in terms of how they perceive Christ at least. Of course, there's not individual thought in terms of independent thinking most of the time. But there's individual thought in terms of how different people express and perceive this religion. That's why there are different ideas, different branches, different frameworks, different interpretations of the same book. So when you tell someone to read the book, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much I read the book. If I'm reading it through a certain lens, I'm always going to get the same outcome. Are you understanding what I'm saying? So understand when they be talking about like you have to draw near to God and He would draw back to you, but I don't even know where I'm drawing at. I have to literally fantasize and imagine a man that I'm reaching out to or connecting with in order for me to get some type of reaction or to make myself believe in something. And I'm supposed to take the testimonies of other people in terms of their ideas and their concepts around this individual that they have all conjured up in their own head. It's ridiculous. It's truly beyond me that people expect me to just believe in something just because they said it, or someone else said it, or someone from a long time ago said it. If I'm supposed to have an intimate relationship with this individual, I need my own personal experience. I need my own personal, encounter relationship with this man in order for me to actually believe. Unfortunately, that's just not the case. I appreciate you, Steve. Moving on. Eric. He says, weird, because the people who really look for him seem to find him. I call bullshit. What people? Because the Mormons seem to find him, the Jehovah's Witnesses seem to find him, the Catholics seem to find him, Seventh-day Adventists seem to find him, a lot of Southern Baptists with their Confederate flags seem to find him, a lot of MAGA supporters seem to find Jesus, a lot of people who supported Charlie Kirk seem to find him as well. So when you talk about people finding him, in what way exactly? Those people who are, I'm talking about swarming over there in the motherland, swarming going to different churches who are getting manipulated by their pastor to send them money or to give them sex and all these different things. They seem to find Jesus there too. So what are we talking about? Find him how, and find him in what way? And when they do find him, how does this Jesus reveal himself to them? Because everybody seems to have a different answer and a different response to a different experience. For those who be in the deep end when it comes to Christianity, if y'all remember this show on Daystar or TBN, used to be a show called It's Supernatural. And I was so infatuated with that show when I was like 13 years old. And I'll never forget, I was maybe like 21, and I was moving stuff into my dorm. And I had connected my TV to the cable, and It's Supernatural came up, right? It going through the channels, and TBN had came up, and It's Supernatural had popped up. And I'm like, I remember watching this shit. This man is going through a different story, and this woman was talking about she was ascended up into the third heaven and all these different things. I'm like, I fell for this shit. These people in production to reenact these different ideas and concepts and whatever they're going through or experiencing. Us to really believe in these different stories and whatever these people are going through. And I'm not taking away from whatever they said that they went through, whatever the case is. But it's just the fact of the matter that I would actually sit down and try and resonate with these different experiences that I never, ever had. And somehow I could build my faith upon their experience as well. It's crazy. It's no different than when people try to share lived experience videos to me about people going into hell and seeing on a fryer. They see Tupac on a fryer and they see Biggie in a juicer. They make this stuff up. He says, nah, without faith it's impossible to please him, so he'll honor your wishes and let you remain ignorant to the fact. Well, that don't seem like a very good thing for him to do.
Yeah, what
I understand that without faith it's impossible to please him, but it also says in the Bible that God has given you a measure of faith to some extent. And I think that if he is a genuine person, and if he's an empathetic person, and if he's a understanding person, then he will understand exactly what I am going through and what I have to endure and experience with a lot of people who do a lot of bullshit. There are a lot of people who come into the name of Christ and commit a lot of crime. They commit a lot of abuse. They misguide and mislead a lot of people. So, excuse me, Christ, if I don't seem to find the golden needle fast enough. I never asked to be put into this world, and somehow I was in heaven at one point, according to that narrative. And you cast me out of heaven, bring me down to earth. Sounds a lot like Lucifer. And now I have to find my way back. Does that really make sense to you? I have to find my way back to heaven. I was in heaven at one point. I gotta find my way back. If I don't go down the right path, if I don't go down the right road, I won't make it back home. I'm gonna be cast into another realm that was made for another set of people or another set of entities that evidently haven't made it there yet because they're still doing their workings here on earth. Yeah, definitely is something that's worth believing. Beyond me. Chris Jones, he says, I thank God he told me you must seek his face. Okay, that's bullshit. Alright, I just went on with this. John Michael York, he says, maybe you're just not listening. I don't hear nothing. Sean, or you know what, heart is hard. That's probably what they're gonna say. Your heart's hard. That's why you can't listen. He said, my sheep hear my voice. Well, I'm not a sheep, so I guess by default that disqualifies me. I'd rather be a dragon. Anything other than a sheep. Good grief. How do you look so lowly on yourself that you're a fucking sheep? Hey, that's beyond me. Sean Hanlon Poe, he says, even when Jesus came down, some didn't believe, and also he sent his messengers to tell you. If this is what God has in his best deck of cards, y'all to try and bring me back to the faith, that is a real insult to my intelligence. I'm not even gonna hold you. If he sent people like y'all to run up my comment section, like you on Judgment Day, God is gonna put on the big flat screen TV. You don't remember them comments that I was telling my followers to put in your Facebook comment section? Do you see how nonsensical that sounds? They're gonna pull up my Facebook account, and my Instagram account, and my YouTube account, and go through my comment section for what? 20 years? How much is God going to display on the flat screen TV to judge me for all these people that I brought to you and you didn't believe them? That one girl that had got you coffee that one Monday morning at college, and she said that Jesus has a plan for you and you didn't want to believe her. Yeah, she also has a bad history of being with men. So like, see if I don't take her judgment very well. Yeah, the person you wanted to use, and you knew that wasn't going to convince me, but you sent that person anyway. Why would you send people my way and you're going to convince me? Is it just to stroke your ego in the very end? I got questions. Anyways, thank you, Sean. We get on to David. He gets a bit snarky. I actually had pre-read this. He says, I don't understand what you mean by this comment. Believe he was real as in he existed? If only there was some historical documents you could do some research into it, and Chad wanted to piggyback and say, indeed, if only. Here's the thing. What we might even remotely know about Christ, we don't know. We can imply that we know about his life, but we really don't know. We don't even know practically 20% of Jesus' life. We only know little events. We know a day or two of when he was a child, a day or two when he was 12. And then we only know selective events of his 3-year ministry. Mind you, there are 365 days within a year. Everything that Jesus taught is not in the Bible. That's just by default. But you can only speculate that his followers emphasized or only put into these books that which Jesus wanted you to know, or those things which Jesus really emphasized on that can really help you in your spiritual journey. And again, it's a good speculation, but nonetheless, it is just a speculation. And that is where your faith comes in, right? That's where you just have to believe. You just have to have faith in that. Anything that Jesus wanted you to know was compacted and condensed and preserved in these manuscripts. Even though that they're just copies of copies, and then on top of that, there's a lot of different stuff that were added and subtracted from these different gospels. One example is the full resurrection story in Mark 16 that was added. Another one is was the adulteral woman. That story that was added. That's not in the earliest manuscripts in the book of John. So those are different things that you just need to assess and really look into. I'm just saying. Appreciate you. Ms. Nisha Rose say, so you spend time, or so you spend your time talking about him more than Christians do. LOL, I guess she's just calling me down. You understand, like, have a real big issue with me utilizing my platform to help other people who have either left the faith, who are currently deconstructing, or people who are just asking questions. And it's so interesting that I'm open enough to actually go over these different issues with those who are deconstructing and asking questions, rather than for them to do it. Because I'm not going to gaslight you. I'm not going to dismiss your feelings or dismiss how you feel or dismiss your experiences. I'm not like y'all. I'm not like the people who are in the church who immediately bypass you or disrespect you or say that the devil is talking in your ear and all these different things. I'm not on that type of trail. But it seems like a lot of y'all are. And that's alarming. Gabriel, he says, okay, so he's just quoting some scriptures. I'm not going through the scriptures. I'm not even going to hold you. I hope I say your name right. He says, just curious, what proof would you consider to be sufficient?
Fucking Christ.
Just show up. That's it. I'm not asking for too much. I'm not asking for $10 million in my bank account. That would be nice, though. I might actually believe it. There was $10 million in my bank account the next day. And I'm not even the type to hoard money. Like, I would be biggest giver out here in the world. But all you have to do is just show up. I would just love to have a one sit down. Whether it's through a vision or through a dream, like how he did with Jacob and Joseph and Daniel. You know, and that men, and the sons and daughters shall see visions and dreams and all that type of stuff. So it would be nice to see that. You know what I'm saying? Julian Ledger says he does. You just don't listen because Satan is louder.
I do.
Well, let me see if I can hear Satan. No, don't hear it. No. This one's really good. I don't know how to say your name, but we're gonna say Traveler. Traveler says he's probably smart to avoid you.
I do.
Wow. That's love.
I do.
That's real love.
I do.
Ronnie says, I'll prove to you that he's real. In this world today, you can't make fun of any religion except Christianity because Satan don't attack what's already his and it's not a threat. He knows only Jesus is real and a threat, so he only attacks that. Yeah. All right, you got it. What I'm supposed to say to that? Oh, yeah. You can't make fun of anything. I mean, like, we're acting like... Okay. That's crazy. We're gonna move on. Jonathan Davidson. He says, he would have told me when I came to this planet, and I agree. You would think that as small, as much, like, from the moment that you can actually conceptualize this world and have actual consciousness of this world, you would think that Jesus could lead you and guide you to all truth or in some way, shape, or form, so that you won't be led astray when you get older. But again, that's not how God works. God works in mysterious ways. Teacher Swartz, he says, it's your heart. Your heart is rebellious. Manning, he says, he told you and you still refuse to believe. He didn't, but okay. Yayo Soto says, probably has shown you in many ways, but you can't hear me through, or you can't hear me though. Shaking my head. Okay, and again, speculation. Dan, they say you can refuse to believe the Bible and the evidence of creation. It's your choice. Nobody's forcing you to believe in Jesus.
It's time that Janet had to do the arms him.
I mean, I don't know what you want me to say about that. I don't know what you want me to do about that, Dan. Appreciate you, though. Emmanuel Mullen says he did, but your rebellious self didn't hear him. And then Shantae says seek. Yeah, okay. Bullshit, once again. But it's not my rebellious self that can't hear him. And I don't know what me being rebellious has to do with anything, because if he could reach out to Saul on Damascus, he shouldn't have an issue reaching out to me. At all. If he can reach out and allow Doubting Thomas to see him and have his hands on him and put his hand in his side and his hands through his fingers through his holes and his hands and stuff like that, I'm pretty sure, I'm almost certain, God can find some way to make me believe. But of course, blessed are those who haven't seen him yet believe. They're going to weaponize that verse. John Ree says he is because you keep talking about Jesus and not Allah for an example. Well, Allah is just Arabic for God. And arguably enough, Jesus was referring to God as Allah if he was speaking Aramaic. So, yeah, don't know what you're going to do about that one. Last but not least, we got Michael Haggerty. He says, actually, others have already told you, but you need to insist. He'd do it again just for you. My food's ready. But why would he accommodate someone who views the first time with disdain and disbelief? Maybe because the first time that he tried to reveal himself to me after leaving the faith, it wasn't good enough. Maybe trying to do these little antics and these little nudges ain't doing it. It's not cutting it. If he is real. And the thing is, I have a lot of respect for the teachings of Christ. I have a lot of respect for the story that you can learn in these different gospels, both in the canonical and the non-canonical gospels, in the Gnostic gospels as well. I have nothing against the story and the character of Christ. I honor those tales. I can read into these different legends and these fables, and I can understand how I'm supposed to carry myself being the light of the world. I can understand the monomyth, as Joseph Campbell talks about. I can understand the hero's journey. But you're trying to turn it into something that is not. You're trying to make the kingdom of God something that can be seen with observation. But it's not going to be with observation.
Goddamn Christ.
It's not something you're going to be able to see, feel, taste, touch. The kingdom of heaven is from within. The Son of Man, he even told Mary, Magdalene, in the Gospel of Mary, the Son of Man is from within. You're already the light of the world. You already have eternal life. You just have to actually realize that. You have to come into an awareness of that. But of course, you've been duped and bamboozled and indoctrinated into believing that you have to give your life. You're the life force. Why would you give your life back to the life force? It's crazy. But okay, for whatever reason, people, grown-ass people believe that God has to play this maze game with you. Has to pop up on your For You page. Has to send you an invite. Has to send you a share to a live stream to make you believe. Man, what type of reality TV show am I going to be in on the great white throne of judgment, the great judgment day? That's going to be a long-ass day. Trillions of people seeing their life for however long. And exactly how far back are we going? Are we going back as far as when I was 6 years old and I was stealing, good stickers out of the teacher's drawer in kindergarten? Or maybe when I had that extra piece of chicken, and people were wondering what happened to that extra piece of chicken when I was 8. Like, how far back are we going? How petty is this guy going to be? Because he's a jealous guy. I'm pretty sure he's a petty guy as well. We've seen that many times in the Bible. I digress on that part. My food is ready, so I'm going to get my food. Hopefully you had enjoyed this video. And if you have enjoyed this,
there's a prevailing mentality I continue to see, and I've been there myself, in struggling believers who tell me
The Atheist Debates Patreon Project presents God, the head of the most dysfunctional family. It may well be that he is. Hi, how you doing? My name is Matt Dillon here. Welcome to the Atheist Debates channel. Thanks for supporting me at patreon.com/atheistdebates. If you haven't done already, you can do that. You can also like and subscribe here. It helps me a great deal, even without financially contributing. So, for those who don't know, I'm a former Christian. I was going to be a pastor. Studied the Bible, read the Bible, taught the Bible, and despite that, I'm still occasionally surprised by things in the Bible that I know I've read and know I've studied, and I had a completely different take on it than I did a little later. My friend Seth Andrews has talked about his God glasses that color how you're going to see things. In today's story, we're going to talk a little bit about something that happens in the Bible that a number of atheist friends of mine and myself have started talking about more often on the show. It's been popularized, probably because of Justin Deconstruction Zone and a few others bringing it up. And on that note, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to have the Bible up for you to actually see. And we'll cut there right now, but I'm not actually going to be reading it in depth for a number of different reasons. I'm going to be summarizing. Because I might as well be your pastor. Hi, I'm Pastor Matt, Brother Matt, Preacher Matt. Use whatever honor if you'd like. Today is actually going to have some frank discussion of sexual assault, so I want to make sure I put a graphic up for that. Like most stuff in the Bible, there's violence, murder, incest, and it's like Game of Thrones, only bad. But one of the many reasons that Christians consistently try to ignore the Old Testament is because of things like this. And what's interesting is I knew this story, I studied this story, I taught this story. But at the time when you're teaching it, the teaching process is very different. It is David disobeyed God. David took another man's wife and had that man killed, and God eventually punished David for that. It is a lesson about obeying God, and David was a big, screw up anyway, because God had given him the position of king, replacing Saul, who was a steward. But what I'll do is I'll have the verses up where you guys can see them, just in case you doubt. You can look up and you can see what we're doing. We're starting in 2 Samuel chapter 11, the story of David and Bathsheba. And here's the summary. David decides to stay in Jerusalem while Joab, his primary military leader, and his servants go out to kill Ammonites on his behalf. This includes Uriah, the Hittite. Now, David gets up from his bed in his house, and this is the king's house, because David's the king. And he gets out and walks along his roof, and he sees a beautiful woman washing herself. And I find that it's time to call BS right from the start here. Because first of all, I'm in my house right now. I got a nice house. It's nothing impressive. It's just, a house like anybody else would have. If I were to go up on my roof and look around in evening, even without the street lights, even if we were just relying on them or whatever else might be there, I'm not sure that I would be able to see more than a couple houses away if someone were bathing and how hot they were. I'm just saying, right off the bat, he's up for an evening stroll on his roof and he sees a hottie washing herself. Did he have like a spyglass? Was David a peeping Tom? It would make sense because he's terrible in virtually every other regard.
You want with a nice mid-evening tactic.
And so the only question becomes, he has to send people out, and he's like, hey, who is this? How does he not know? How is he the king, and he doesn't know who lives a house or two away? Is that ridiculous? Is there something, maybe he's way up high, and so there's 100 houses down there that he's looking down, But how does he not know? But the people he asked definitely knew. And evidently, she's just like incredibly beautiful, and the kind of woman that you need to immediately invite over. And she tells him that she's married, and he has sex with her anyway. That's wild already. So he's the king, and somebody says, "Hey, oh yeah, this is one of your soldiers' wives." Oh, well, get her over here, because I'm going to do her. So send a message, she come over, they have sex, and weirdly, the Bible mentions that she had just purified herself after her menstruation. And while you can get pregnant at any time, because sperm can hang around and everything else, it doesn't necessarily say she came over that day, or only that day. So it seems like we kind of skip past things in verses. And there's just like a verse here. David sent his messengers, took her, she came in unto him, he lay with her, and she was purified from her uncleanliness, and she returned into her house. And the woman conceived and sent and told David, I am a child. I mean, that's the whole thing. So I'm thinking they were probably banging for a couple of weeks, maybe longer, who knows how long the war stuff's going on, and she ends up pregnant. And David decides that he needs to hide it. So he understands that her husband is out fighting for him. So he sends a note to Joab, who's military leader, to send Uriah back. Uriah shows up, and an honorable person would say, I had sex with your wife when she's pregnant. But this is David. He was basically raised by God to take things that are his including women, wives, and everything else. And so what he's really trying to do here is to find a way to hide this. He doesn't want Uriah to know, because he did all this in secret. He doesn't want him to know that his wife's pregnant with his baby. So he brings Uriah back so that Uriah can go home and have sex with his wife, think that he got pregnant, and then he'll raise David's bastard. It's great. It's a perfect plan. And so Uriah shows up, David asks him about the war, gives him a gift, tells him to go home and get some rest. Uriah, though, doesn't go home. And so in the morning, David finds out, and he's like, bro, why on earth did you not go home last night? I hooked you up. I gave you a gift. I brought you back. You should go home. You should have gone there. And Uriah's like, I'm a soldier, and my men are out sleeping in tents, and I don't deserve the bed, comfort, and sex with my wife. These people are already, let's just be honest, they're nuts. I was in the Navy for 8.5 years. If I got brought back on shore leave to see my significant other, I would not care if my buddies were out there not getting laid. As a matter of fact, my buddies that were out there not getting laid would have been like, dude, did you get some? That's the way it would have been. But evidently things were way different then. And there was some kind of incredible honor in Uriah that decided to make him deny any comfort or pleasure. And this really irritated David, because he's like, I really needed him to do that. So he says, look, stay here for one more day. And I'll send you back to battle tomorrow. You want to go back and you want to get with your boys and you want to, kill people and break things. Go ahead, we'll do that. And so David gets him drunk. And yet Uriah still doesn't go home. At this point, I feel like there should be somebody popping in going, girl, Uriah gay. But who knows? Maybe he's just an incredibly honorable military person. So David, when he fails to get Uriah to go back and have sex with his wife, sends him back to the battlefront, and he sends him with a letter for Joab. And it says, put him in the worst of the front lines so that he gets killed in battle. Can you imagine going back to the front line war for your king? After you just hung out with him, gave him news of the war, decided not to take any comfort with your wife, not even to go see, hang out, have a meal, have sex, whatever. And he gives you a letter to give to your boss, and unbeknownst to you, that letter says, kill this guy. Get this guy killed. That is really strange. But also, can you imagine being Joab and receiving that letter? You're there fighting a war for King David. He asks you to send this dude back. You send the dude back, and he comes back with a note. And that guy's carrying a note that says, hey, put this guy in the harshest of spots so that he gets killed. Is Joab thinking, oh no, I'm going to lose one of what is clearly my most dedicated soldiers? And why? If all this is attempting to keep this story a secret, why are we reading about it? I mean, David's a king. After killing Uriah, none of this had to come out. I know. There's a God in this story here, and that's going to make things a little more difficult and get some stories to come out, because David did this in private, but God's going to do it in public. Yeah, I know, I get the story. It's nonsense, but cool. So we attempted to cover up, then we attempted another cover up. So Uriah dies in battle. And verse 27, when Bathsheba hears that Uriah is dead, she mourns him, and then she marries David. And she has a son, and what David did displeases the Lord. Now that's cool story. We're done. That's all the dysfunction there is. But there's a lot more chapters to this, and it seems to just keep getting worse. So Nathan shows up with a message for David from God. And he gives this thinly veiled parable about stealing a little lamb, and David's just stupid and outraged that someone would steal the only lamb this man has. We should have his head. And Nathan's like, hey, dumbass, that was a parable. You're the thief. You stole Uriah's wife and had him killed. And then David says, thus saith the Lord God of Israel, I anointed thee king over Israel, and I delivered thee out of the hand of Saul. And I gave thee thy master's house, thy master's wives, into thy bosom, and gave thee the house of Israel and Judah. And if that had been too little, I would moreover have given thee such and such things. Wherefore hast thou despised the commandment of the Lord to do evil in his sight? Oh, I said I wasn't going to read it. Here we go. This is what the Lord God says. I chose you to be the king of Israel. I saved you from Saul. I gave you his family and his wives. I made you king. Why did you disobey? Why did you have the Ammonites kill Uriah so that you could take his wife? It's just like you killed him yourself. See, God, the Lord God, in this passage, isn't very consistent or particularly wise. He's pretty stupid, actually, because he already let him take one man's family and wives and made him king. And so he built up that expectation that he gets to do whatever he wants and have sex with whoever he wants. And of course, ordering someone's death is tantamount to killing them. Yes, that's true, but this is how the king you raised was raised, God. You brought him up to do this. And you're getting ready to do the same thing to reinforce that same message. You already let him be awful. Why are you objecting now? It's because it wasn't the awful that you were looking for. But God's going to punish David. And here's where the objections start rolling in from the heathens. In verse 11, it says, someone in your own family will have sex with your wives, and everyone will know it. It specifically says, thus saith the Lord, behold, I will raise up evil against thee out of thy own house, and will take thy wives before thine eyes, and give them unto thy neighbor, and he shall lie with thy wives in the sight of the sun. So David admits to Nathan that he sinned, and Nathan's like, don't worry, you're going to live. God will forgive you. But because you caused God to lose some respect, he's going to kill the baby that you and Bathsheba just had. And in verse 15, Nathan leaves the house. The Lord God struck the baby with an illness, causing it to become very sick. And David then begins to pray and starve himself and beg God and lay and sleep on the ground, pleading for the life of this baby. And the baby died on the seventh day, and so David got up and went in and washed up and had a bite to eat. I mean, when David saw that the servants whispered, David perceived the child was dead. Therefore David said unto the servants, is the child dead? And they said, he's dead. He rose from the earth and washed and anointed himself and changed his apparel. And came into the house and worshipped. And he came in his own house when he required. They set bread before him.
God fucking.
So after all this time, and they asked him, they're like, hey, dude, you were just bawling and screaming and wailing and flailing on the ground and refusing to eat, and now you washed up and had a sandwich. And David's like, hey, while I was alive, there was some chance that God would pity me if I starved myself. But it's dead now, so that ship sailed, and there's no longer a reason to not eat. Plus, he had to get busy because he knocked Bathsheba up again, and they had Solomon, who later becomes king. There are atheists and heathens and friends of mine that dig in on this particular passage, and it's kind of shocking and interesting, but I don't think enough people spend as much time on it as perhaps they should. Because it seems very performative of Dave. I can get my way cool. Let me get back to business. Let me go have another kid. No sense crying over spilt milk kind of thing. And it is framed as just that quick return. Go read it. And 12:18, the kid's dying. He spends 7 days doing 12:20, boom, he's ready to sit down and eat again. But the big thing is that Nathan had said that God declared that a member of David's family was going to have sex with his wives in public. How does that happen? Well, that story continues from this, and that starts with Amnon and Tamar, because David has a son named Absalom, who had a beautiful sister named Tamar. And David had another son named Amnon, who was in love with Tamar. So he's in love with his half-sister, but he's worried because she's sisters with Absalom, and he's worried that he's not, going to get approved or whatever else. Given the number of wives and kids, we're probably talking about a whole bunch of half-siblings. David had who knows how many wives. I'm sure it's listed. I don't really care. There's more than 10 because 10 of them are what we're leading up to. Tamar was a virgin. I have no idea how they knew that or how anyone knew, as virginity isn't an identifiable trait. But, it might be just a young girl. Amnon had the worst case of corn dog blue balls seemingly in history for his sister. He was starving himself. He was pining for her. He was so desperately in love with her that he was not eating. And a friend of his came up and said, "Dude, you look like shit. What's up?" And so he told me, he's like, I'm really in love with Tamar, but I just don't know what to do about it. Now, that frames this as if this is a young, lovesick individual, someone who's not like genuine. This is I'm doing self-harm. I want this person so much. And his friend, who is evidently brilliant, so here's what you do, man. You already look bad. So pretend like you're sick. And when your dad comes over to see you, just tell him you want your half-sister Tamar to bring you some food and make it in front of you so that you can eat it from her hand. And so he does this. He pretends that he's sick. David comes over and sees what's going on. And he's like, I can't go to school today, Dad. I'm feeling really bad. Could you get my half-sister Tamar to come over and make me some dough? I don't know why the king is coming in and doing this. I get it. He's a prince, I guess. But so Tamar came over, and Amnon's in bed, and she took some dough, and she made some cakes while he watched. This is quite the specific cooking fetish. Like, I need... Go ahead, baby, knead that dough for me. But when the cakes were ready, he wouldn't eat. And he commanded all the servants to leave him. You guys get out of here, get out of here. I need to eat. And at verse 10, he says to Tamar, go ahead and bring the food over here to me and feed me. I guess I'm just too weak to feed myself. Could you feed me? And when she got close enough, he grabbed her by the hand and said, hey, come in here and sleep with me. And she begged him not to force her. And that it would be shameful and embarrassing. And everybody would hear. And she says, please go ask the king, and he'll let you marry me. But he refused. He was so much in love with her that he refused to do the honorable thing, even after she offered to marry him with the king's permission. And the Bible says he was stronger than her, and he forcibly raped her. But it turns out when he was done, he hated her. He hated her even more than he loved her. And he told her to get out. So not so much a lovelorn individual, but a lust-filled monster. By your fruits you shall know them. And she begged him not to kick her out. She's like, first she's begging him not to rape her. Please just have the king marry her. Then after he does it, and he hates her, and he wants to kick her out, she's begging him not to kick her out because this will make things even worse than it was before. But he calls his servants in to kick her out. Now, she's all very upset, and crying and tearing her colorful dress. And her brother Absalom finds out and basically says, don't worry, I'll take care of everything. And then David found out, and David was very angry, but he didn't want to. He didn't want to chastise Amnon because that was his firstborn. So he's not going to chastise or punish his firstborn son for raping his own half-sister, who's also David's child. And Absalom, her brother, now hates Amnon, but didn't tell him. And so 2 years later, in verse 23, and it came to pass 2 years later that Absalom had sheepers in Balzor, which is beside Ephraim, and Absalom invited all the king's sons. He sets up something. But in any case, what ends up happening is there's some confusing misinformation such that when Absalom murders Amnon, the message gets back to David that he had killed all the king's sons because the rest of them had fled. Because, they're not the actual warriors. They're the king's sons. They don't have to do anything. So Absalom goes into hiding. By the way, like so many other women used as props in Bible stories, I don't think we ever hear anything about Tamar again. But eventually Absalom has a daughter, which he names Tamar. I don't know if I missed it saying that she died, or if it ignored. It does just say that she remained desolate in her brother's house. I don't know. I might have missed the point where it says, oh, and she died. But he names the daughter after her later on. So he goes into hiding, and then we get to verse 14. He's going to return, or chapter 14. He's going to return to Jerusalem. And if we skip down to verse 25, we see that Absalom is a dashing young man. He's the most handsome man in all of Israel. He is absolute perfection from head to toe, according to the Bible. Every part of his body was perfect. And he comes back to Jerusalem and he's trying to see the king, but the king refuses to see him. So what's he do? Well, if you look at verse 30, he notices that Joab, the head of the military, has a field of barley next to his. So he tells his servants to go burn Joab's barley fields. And Joab comes over and is like, dude, why did you burn my fields? And Absalom's like, I've been asking to see the king. Make it happen. Now, despite being the head of the military, you can't do anything to Absalom directly. He's the king's son, even if he's persona non grata. And so Joab does, and eventually Absalom gets to see the king and gets forgiven by the king for killing his firstborn for raping his sister. And Absalom spends the next little bit of time talking out of both sides of his mouth in an attempt to take over David's kingdom, because there's this other figure whose name I'm not going to pronounce correctly, I'm sure, but Ahithophel. And both David and Absalom listen to this guy as if he were the voice of God, according to the Bible. So David starts lying and conniving and arranging things, building a conspiracy to kind of overthrow David. I guess because he's still mad that David didn't do anything, and he spent years in kind of in exile. Or it's not completely clear, but it's possible that once again I might have skimmed something. Because reading the King James Version, it makes it really easy to skim all of the things that I'm summarizing for you now. I'm sure I missed something else. So David ends up on the run. In chapter 15, he flees Jerusalem, and he's looking for people who don't like Absalom to join him, because it looks like there's getting ready to be a massive struggle between him and his son. And these guys were listening to Ahithophel. Wow. But perhaps they shouldn't have. Because in chapter 16, verse 21, Ahithophel says to Absalom, "Go into thy father's concubines, which he left to keep the house, and all Israel shall hear that thou art abhorred of the father, and then shall the hands of all that are with thee be strong." Which is basically saying, your dad left some of his wives here, go have sex with them, and everyone will know that you had sex with your father's wives, and they will support you more. That will be a fulfillment of Nathan's prophecy on behalf of God, that he will have a member of David's family rape his wives in public in front of people. So we're fulfilling what God said. And what God said had to happen, right? In verse 22, they set up a tent for Absalom on the roof, and he had sex with his father's wives on the roof, so that all of Israel could see what happened. Now I'm wondering, when it says that they would support him more, were they supporting him more because they knew him to be powerful? Was this a hey, we're gonna you cucked your dad, so we're gonna support you now? Was it because they were afraid of him? Was he more monstrous than David? Was it for fear of what he might do to their wives or somebody else's wives? Because we don't really care about ourselves that much. We don't care about our property in the wives or property in the Bible. So is God the head of the most dysfunctional family? Yeah, probably. You will know them by their fruits. Because God picked David to be king. Because God got mad that Saul, who he had picked to be king, stopped following his instructions. The entire Old Testament is a comedy of God's errors. God picks Adam and Eve, that goes wrong. God then ends up flooding the entire world and picking one family, that goes wrong. Every single time God picks his chosen people, it goes wrong. I did an entire talk in Australia, you can probably find it on the internet, probably on this channel, called Why Won't You Love Me? Because God just can't get anybody to follow him. But what did God do? Well, God was mad at Saul for a number of different things, but God was mad at Saul because he didn't kill all the Amalekites. He kept King Agag alive, and that was enough. So he anointed David to take over as king when Saul died. Saul begged Samuel. It's really interesting. Maybe we'll go back and do a look at 1 Samuel. Because watching Saul grovel to Samuel to try to win back God's favor basically shows how Samuel was just manipulating all these things on behalf of God. Same as Nathan was, same as David did, same as all do. God's never actually doing anything. God's just telling people to tell people that he's going to do stuff. God's going to tell them, nope, I'm going to make David king. Nope, I'm going to make Saul king. Nope, I'm going to have your wives assaulted in public as a punishment. God told him to kill everybody. He didn't, so he anointed David to take over. And no matter how much begging Saul did to Samuel, Samuel wouldn't come back, and that means God won't come back, because Samuel was the conduit to God. God rewarded David and trained him to expect other men's women and other men's families and other men's property, because that's what he got from Saul. God trained David to expect that. And then punishes him when he does it again. Except God didn't punish David. Instead, God killed David and Bathsheba's baby.
So I just I didn't do any more research. That was it. I was like, I don't know what Mormon is, but he is. I don't know. So that was my first day, introduction. But I was raised, I wouldn't say, I was raised pretty, conservatively, sheltered, I would say. I didn't cuss, we didn't say the words, stupid or but. I didn't watch PG-13 movies until I was 13. I didn't watch R-rated movies at all. Yeah.
Would you say that you probably heard a lot of other people's stories where they talk about the religious trauma of their childhood? Would you say that you were spared?
If you lived there, you could have put my asshole in checkmate.
Yeah, definitely. I had a different kind of experience with my own raising. I think a big part of that is that I'm pretty neurodivergent, and I just didn't understand what was going on around me. Being sheltered, I didn't really know how to interact with my world as much as I could have, I think. I don't know how to better explain that other than I just didn't feel right.
Right. But again, it's definitely a nod to the idea that life can still be crazy hard even without religious trauma. But it's like you were thinking God's judging you constantly and you're about to burn in hell for it all.
No, never. It never came up until I was in high school and I did start questioning a few things here and there. Not really, I didn't think critically at all. No critical thinking in my brain in high school at all. I remember telling my mom one time that I wanted to be pagan because I was thinking that. For me, that was as far, that must be the truest religion because it was the oldest that I could think of. That was my explanation. So I remember my mom suddenly saying, out of nowhere, I've never heard this before, but she told me, well, what's going to happen when you wake up one day and we're all gone and you're still stuck here on Earth? And I was like the rapture, I was like, we have never heard, first of all, she's never spoken about religion. I was like, you believe in that? I don't think that's gonna happen. I don't know. I was very intense. And my family, we just don't have conversations. So that was the end of the conversation. It was just her saying that and me being like, what?
That's very strange because most evangelicals have the urgency, even if they're not super serious, they have some urgency of at least making sure that their own kids are saved, even if they're not ready to go talk to your neighbors or be a missionary, at least make sure your kids are getting in the kingdom. That's really weird. They kept it to themselves so much. Did you ever figure out why they were so hush-hush about it?
My parents, first of all, I'm the first child of 4. My mom is the youngest of 8. My dad is one of 5. I know that they were raised I know my mom went to church. I think every Sunday. My grandparents were religious. I think it was just something they didn't realize they needed to teach, or I don't know if they just didn't think so hard on it, because they are a little bit more progressive, especially now. I'm not really sure what the disconnect was for why she thought that but wasn't teaching us that. We didn't go to church or anything like that. We didn't have a Bible in our home. So I think it was just something maybe she believed but never taught. I don't know. Maybe it was just something from her upbringing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Now, before we get into your teenage years, just curious, did you ever have any exposure, even if it was just your own thoughts of, I wonder if there's a God, and I wonder, how I'm supposed to communicate with him, or if he's involved in my life and leading me or talking to me? Did you have much of a spiritual life before your teenage years and your involvement with Mormonism?
No. I know that I was baptized as a baby. That was it. As a Methodist.
So your spiritual experience really didn't start until you were 17.
Not until, I would say around then, yeah.
Well, that is.
I just
that
got
is
myself
very
a
different than
4.
most of the interviews that I've had, and the fact that you went from almost, it sounds like almost nothing religiously, in a sense, or maybe Christian culturally maybe, but not like on fire for God, let's turn the world upside down, and I love Jesus with all my heart. Going from basically nothing, technically Christian but practically secular, to a Mormon is quite a jump. So take us in. How in the world did that happen?
Okay. Yeah. It was a pretty big jump. I have to say a big part of it was how stupid I was. And I not to say that's I'm not saying that about other people, but myself in general, I was just not comprehending the world very well. Even though we were well traveled, like I grew up in Missouri, but I lived in Chile for a little while. My education was very, how do I put it? Not Christian nationalism, but, here in this Missouri, it is a red state, and while there are some Democrats, there's a lot more Republicans, and that's kind of how our educational system is. I had a very lacking education. I was raised on what little I knew transferred over to Mormonism so easily, because Mormonism is all about how America is the best, and that's kind of how my government.
Hey guys, it's Britt Hartley with a heavy episode today on the 4 existential fears. I'm an atheist spiritual director. I used to do the majority of my coaching for religious deconstruction, and now the majority of my coaching is people in nihilism or existential crisis. And here's the thing, nihilism, the abyss, would maybe be manageable if it weren't for the monsters that live there. So today we're going to meet the 4 monsters that lurk deep. And this is going to be working off of Irvin Yalom, who was an existential psychiatrist and who noticed that traditional therapy wasn't meeting these deep existential concerns that lie at the root of people's issues. So he laid out the 4 ultimate concerns in his book, Existential Psychotherapy, showing how these 4 things shape human anxiety and our search for meaning. And so he was one of the rare psychoanalysts who was working with people in deep philosophical questions about the meaning of life. And he found that people were usually afraid of these 4 things. So the 4 fears are fear of death, fear of freedom, that one takes some time to explain, fear of isolation, and fear of meaninglessness. And it wasn't until I met the...
For Jews, Jesus is not the Messiah. He is a sorcerer whom a court condemned, and that is written down. Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Sanhedrin, Folio 43. That page was torn out of every printed edition for more than 400 years. Today you're going to read it in full, line by line, and you're going to see who erased it and with whose permission. But that is only the first of 5 distinct answers Judaism has given about the same man. You're going to hear all of them, and the one that will surprise you most is not the oldest or the most recent, it's the one in the middle, and it was signed by the most influential rabbi in Jewish history. If you think this deserves to be treated with the sources in hand, hit like now. If by the halfway point you think otherwise, take it back, and that's fine. One clarification before we begin. Almost nothing here is from the Bible. These are real, verifiable documents, but from outside Scripture. Our position doesn't move a millimeter, and you'll hear it clearly at the end. An informed believer isn't afraid to read someone who thinks differently. They're afraid of being told a distorted version. Let's start with the only thing nobody disputes. Jesus was Jewish. He was born into a Jewish family. He debated Torah with Jewish teachers. He observed Jewish festivals, and he died in Jerusalem during Passover. His first followers were Jewish, and the movement that started with him was not a new religion. It was one more current within a Judaism that already had Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and Zealots. Then, at some point between the year 30 and the year 100, that current broke from the trunk. It wasn't a single day. It was a process of friction, expulsions, bitter arguments, and in time, blood. And out of that friction came what we're about to read. Not calm biographies, but verbal weapons. Writings designed so that a Jew who encountered a Christian missionary in the marketplace would have a ready answer on his lips. Now the erased page. The Talmud is an enormous collection. It's not a book, it's a library. Discussions by Jewish teachers on law, ritual, ethics, medicine, agriculture, dreams, everything. It was assembled over centuries. And the most complete version, the Babylonian, was composed in Persia under the Sasanian Empire, roughly between the 3rd and 7th centuries. Hold on to that geographical detail because in a few minutes it's going to explain something almost nobody connects. Within that library there is a tractate called Sanhedrin, which discusses how courts and executions worked. And in folio 43, in the middle of a dry technical discussion about whether a herald should announce a verdict before or during the condemned man's transfer, a line suddenly appears that has nothing technical about it. The section says that on the eve of Passover, they hanged Yeshu, that for 40 days before the execution, a herald went out to proclaim that this man was going to be stoned because he had practiced sorcery and had seduced Israel into straying. That anyone who knew something in his favor should come forward and speak for him, and that since no one came forward, they hanged him on the eve of Passover. Stop for a second at that scene. Imagine the streets of Jerusalem packed for the festival. Pilgrims arriving from Galilee, from Alexandria, from Babylon, lambs crowded in the temple's enclosures. And in the middle of that noise, a man walking every day for over a month, shouting the name of the condemned and asking someone, anyone, to come defend him. 40 days of public invitation, 40 days of silence. It's a powerful scene, and it is, point by point, the exact inversion of what the Gospels tell. Hold on to that sensation, because in a few minutes you'll understand why it fits so well in reverse. It's not coincidence, it's design. Now, there's a detail that history channels usually present as a flaw in the passage, and it actually isn't. You may have noticed that the herald announces stoning, but the paragraph ends with hanging. It sounds like a contradiction, like a paragraph badly stitched together. And the truth is, it isn't. And this can be verified in the Mishnah, which is the oldest layer of written rabbinic law. In Tractate Sanhedrin, chapter 6, Mishnah 4, the Mishnah describes the procedure for stoning with an uncomfortable level of detail, the height of the platform, who does the pushing, who throws the first stone. And after that, it discusses the matter of hanging the body. Rabbi Eliezer holds that all who are stoned are then hung. The sages respond that only the blasphemer and the idolater are hung. The biblical basis for all of this is Deuteronomy 21, verses 22 and 23, where the text speaks of hanging on a tree someone who has been executed, with the express order not to leave the body there overnight. In other words, hanging was not the execution. It was the public display of the body after the execution. And notice the exact charges the herald announces: sorcery and leading Israel into idolatry. Precisely the two categories that, according to the sages, do require the body to be hung. The paragraph is not broken. It is following a legal procedure to the letter, which, for the purposes of whoever wrote it, is even more devastating. It doesn't say, they killed him. It says, we processed him correctly, and the law condemned him. And the end of that section is almost never quoted. At the close of the execution account, a teacher named Ulla objects. He asks, mockingly, whether anyone would really expect to search for evidence in favor of a man like this, a seducer whom the Torah commands us not to pity, citing Deuteronomy 13. And the response he gets is a single line, and it is the strangest line in the entire passage.
Jesus, Lord, yes. God, fuck it.